I exposed my dad's affair with my aunt, sent him to prison for fraud, then watched my revenge shatter their perfect new family forever. We were basically what everyone would call the perfect family, at least on paper. My dad, Richard, 53, male, everyone calls him Rick, started this construction company right after marrying my mom, Sarah. They had been married for 25 years. Mom comes from this big Catholic family in Connecticut. She's got 5 sisters, and they used to be super close, like finishing each other's sentences close. Her younger sister, Rachel, was always around when I was growing up. She was that cool aunt who'd sneak me extra dessert and cover for me when I did dumb teenage stuff. We lived in this nice house in Lexington. Not mega rich or anything, but comfortable. Dad's business really took off when I was around 10, and suddenly we were living pretty well. Family vacations to Disney World every other year, new cars, that kind of thing. Mom was super involved with church stuff and ran these big charity events that everyone in town knew about. Aunt Rachel taught kindergarten at the local elementary school, and all the parents loved her because she was so good with the kids. Every single Sunday, no matter what, we'd have these massive family dinners. Everyone had to be there unless you were literally in the hospital. Dad would fire up his fancy grill, the one he spent way too much money on but wouldn't admit it, and all my aunts would bring their special dishes. Rachel always made this amazing mac and cheese that everyone fought over. I remember this one Sunday, maybe 6 months before everything went down, when my cousin Tommy, Rachel's kid, made some joke about how his mom was always texting someone these days. Rachel got super weird about it and said it was just work stuff. Dad knocked over his drink right after that. I didn't get the signs back then. But the day it all blew up is burned into my brain forever. It was our annual Memorial Day barbecue. Everyone was there, all my aunts, uncles, cousins, even some neighbors. We always did this huge cookout where people would come and go all day. Dad was acting weird the whole time, kept checking his phone and walking away to take work calls, which was strange because it's Memorial Day. What construction work is happening on Memorial Day? Rachel was late, which was super weird for her. She's usually the first one to show up to help set everything up. When she finally got there, she was all flustered, saying there was traffic on Memorial Day in our suburb. Sure. She put her phone down on the table to help carry some food out, and that's when it happened. My cousin Tommy, who was 16 at the time, grabbed what he thought was his phone. They had the same blue iPhone case. He was going to show his girlfriend some TikTok or whatever, but when he opened it, man, there they were. Hundreds of messages between my dad and Rachel. Not just normal messages either, like explicit stuff, pictures, plans to meet up, messages about how they were meant to be together and how they'd figure out a way to tell everyone soon. Tommy just lost it, started screaming at his mom right there in the backyard. Everyone came running to see what was wrong, and he just held up the phone and started reading messages out loud. I've never seen anything like what happened next. My cousins were yelling, my aunts were crying, my Uncle Mark, Rachel's husband, looked like he was going to throw up. I just stood there frozen, watching this nightmare unfold in real time. I never thought my dad would go this far. He and my mom had been my rock, my safety net, the one thing I thought I could always count on. But now my hands were trembling so badly I had to shove them in my pockets, and this strange detached feeling washed over me, like I was watching someone else's family fall apart on a TV screen rather than witnessing my own world crumble. The worst part wasn't even the screaming or crying. It was those few seconds of dead silence after Tommy finished reading the last message. Then Rachel let out this sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and everything just exploded. That's when it hit me, really hit me deep in my gut. Our family was never going to be the same after this moment. Some things you just can't put back together once they break. And my mom, God, my mom just stood there, completely frozen. She had this plate of potato salad in her hands and just kept holding it, staring at nothing while Rachel tried to grab the phone from Tommy. The potato salad slowly slid off the plate and nobody even moved to clean it up. That's what I remember most clearly. This glob of potato salad just sitting there in the grass while my entire family imploded. Dad tried to say it wasn't what it looked like. Classic, right? But then Rachel started crying and saying they didn't mean for it to happen. They just fell in love and didn't know how to tell anyone. Rachel even had the audacity to say, right in front of everyone, including Mom, that she and Dad had a real connection a long time ago that just couldn't be denied. I still remember the sound Mom made. It wasn't even really a cry or a scream, just this weird gasping noise, like someone had just pushed her underwater. Then she turned around, walked inside, went to her room and locked the door. We didn't know it then, but that was pretty much the last time she'd be herself for a long time. The barbecue obviously ended right there. Everyone left except for my mom's oldest sister Mary, who stayed to try to talk to Mom through the door. Dad packed a bag and left to give everyone space to process things. Rachel ran out crying with Tommy screaming after her, and I just sat on our back porch for hours, staring at that stupid potato salad on the ground, trying to understand how my whole life had just fallen apart in the space of like 15 minutes. The next few days after the barbecue were just weird, like this strange limbo where nobody knew what to do. Mom wouldn't come out of her room except to use the bathroom, and even then she'd wait until she thought I was asleep. I could hear her pacing at night, walking back and forth for hours. I'd leave food outside her door, and sometimes it would be gone when I checked later, but most times it was untouched. Dad kept calling and texting me nonstop. He was staying at some hotel in Cambridge, sending these long messages about how things aren't always black and white, and how sometimes life is complicated. Like seriously, that's what you're going with? He even tried to convince me that he and Rachel had fought their feelings for years, but eventually realized they were soulmates. He wanted me to understand that it wasn't just some cheap affair, as if that made it better somehow. Rachel was even worse. She started showing up at our house at random times, trying to explain things to Mom through the bedroom door. She'd stand there crying about how sorry she was while also saying stuff like, "But you have to understand, Sarah, when love is real, you can't fight it." I had to literally threaten to call the cops to make her leave. Things got really bad about 2 weeks in. I was at work when our neighbor called me. She said she'd been bringing in our mail and noticed Mom's car hadn't moved in days, and she could see through the upstairs window that Mom was just sitting in the same chair, not moving. I rushed home and found Mom exactly like that, just sitting there in the dark, still in the same clothes from the barbecue, staring at this old family photo from Disney World. She wouldn't respond when I talked to her, wouldn't even blink, just kept staring at that picture. I tried to help her up, and that's when I realized she was burning up with fever. I called 911 right away. The EMTs said she was severely dehydrated and had a really high fever from a massive infection. Turned out she hadn't been taking her medications for her autoimmune condition for the past 2 weeks. The hospital was a nightmare. They admitted her to the psych ward after she had this complete breakdown in the ER, screaming about how she'd given Rachel everything, helped her pay for college, let her live with us for free when she got divorced from her first husband, even got her the teaching job at the school. The doctor said it was a severe depressive episode triggered by acute trauma. And you know what Rachel did? She actually told the doctors that Mom had always been unstable and had episodes when they were growing up. Complete lies. She even tried to suggest that maybe Mom's mental issues were why Dad turned to her for comfort. The doctor shut that down real quick, but the fact that she even tried, man. My aunts, except Rachel, obviously, took turns staying with Mom in the hospital. Mary, Patricia, Catherine, and Elizabeth all rearranged their lives to make sure someone was always there. But the damage was done. Mom wouldn't talk to anyone except the doctors. She'd just lie there crying or staring at nothing. Meanwhile, my dad couldn't care less. He and Rachel were already playing house. They got an apartment together using money from Dad's business. Rachel quit her teaching job because suddenly she was too stressed to work. They started posting on social media about starting fresh and choosing happiness. The worst part was how they started spreading their version of events around town. Rachel told everyone at church that Mom had driven Dad away by being cold and distant, said Mom was obsessed with her charity work and neglected Dad, even suggested that Mom had known about them for months but pretended not to notice because she preferred to play the victim. Tommy, Rachel's son, was having a really rough time. He was living with his dad, Rachel's ex, full-time and refused to see his mom. But Rachel somehow twisted that too, telling people that I had poisoned Tommy against her and Dad. Like, no, Rachel, pretty sure you did that all by yourself when you destroyed our families. By the end of the first month, it was clear Mom wasn't going to be coming home anytime soon. The doctors recommended a longer-term care facility, so we moved her to another psychiatric hospital. I had to pack up some of her stuff to bring there, and finding things for her to wear just wrecked me. All these normal clothes, her favorite sweater, her gardening jeans, her Sunday church dress, just hanging there in the closet like everything was fine, like she'd be back any minute to wear them again. That's when I really understood that nothing would ever be normal again. Our family was just gone, and the people who destroyed it were already moving on like nothing had happened, while the rest of us were left trying to pick up the pieces they'd shattered. Life got into this weird routine after Mom went to the hospital. I'd visit her every Wednesday and Sunday after work. The doctor said having a regular schedule would help her feel more stable. At first she wouldn't really talk much during visits, just kind of nod or shake her head. But after about 3 months, she started having good days where she'd actually look at me when I talked about my work or what was going on with my cousins. Then Rachel dropped her first bomb. She posted this whole thing on Facebook with a picture of a sonogram, not just pregnant with twins. The post was all about God's blessings and love finding a way, and how she and Dad were over the moon excited. She tagged like everyone we knew, including Mom's sisters and some of Mom's friends from church. Who does that? I found out later from my cousin Lisa that Rachel had actually gone off her birth control months before the affair came to light. She told Lisa she was hoping for an accident because she thought a baby would make Dad leave Mom. Guess she got her wish, and then some. Dad went completely nuts with the pregnancy news, started posting daily updates about his growing family, and calling the twins their miracle babies. He even had the nerve to message me asking if I wanted to help them set up the nursery in their new house. Yeah, they bought this massive place in Newton using money from his business. I was shocked at how much money Dad was getting out of that business. Like the construction business was doing okay, but not buying million-dollar houses okay. Mom's doctors had to adjust her medication when she found out about the pregnancy. She stopped eating again for a while. The only thing that seemed to help was when Tommy started visiting her. It was like she could handle hearing about life going on from him because he was hurting too. But Rachel and Dad wouldn't leave me alone. They kept showing up at my apartment unannounced. Rachel would stand there with her hand on her belly talking about how the twins would need their big brother and how family has to stick together in times of joy. The woman destroyed her sister's life and was acting like we should all be celebrating. The real crazy started when she was about 7 months along. She began calling me multiple times a day about helping with the twins after they were born. Said she and Dad were so busy with the business that they'd need someone to watch the babies 3 days a week. When I didn't answer her calls, she'd email me these long guilt trips about how children are innocent and how I was punishing babies for adult problems. Then the twins were born, Emma and Ethan, and Rachel started this thing where she'd send me daily pictures of them with captions like missing their big brother or waiting for Uncle James to come meet them. When that didn't work, she switched to sending videos of them crying with messages like they can feel that their family is incomplete. It was straight up emotional manipulation. The worst was when they started showing up at my work. Rachel would come with the twins during my lunch break, crying in the lobby about how expensive daycare was and how they needed family help. My CO workers were super uncomfortable. My boss even offered to call security a few times, but I worried that would just make everything messier. Dad tried a different approach. He started talking about making me a partner in his business. Said he needed someone he could trust to help manage things while he focused on his new family. Said he'd give me a 25% stake if I agreed to come work with them and be there for the twins. Looking back, that offer makes me laugh now considering what I know about the business. They even recruited people to pressure me. Rachel would tell people at church that I was refusing to acknowledge my own siblings and that I was letting jealousy poison my relationship with innocent children. Some church ladies actually came to my apartment to counsel me about forgiveness and family obligations. I had to switch to a different grocery store because I kept running into these people who tried to lecture me. The thing that really got me, though, was when Rachel started comparing herself to Mom. She'd say stuff like, "I'm being a better mother than Sarah ever was, and at least I'm emotionally available for my children." She even told people that the twins were lucky not to have Mom in their life because they deserve better than her instability. I was absolutely disgusted by her audacity. By the time the twins were 6 months old, Rachel and Dad had this whole fantasy worked out. They wanted me to take the twins every weekend so they could have couple time, said it would be good practice for when I had my own kids. Rachel even started telling people she was saving a room in their house for me like she actually thought I'd want to be part of their messed up little world. I kept thinking about Mom sitting in her hospital room, doing group therapy and taking her meds and slowly trying to rebuild herself, while these two played happy family with the proof of their betrayal. That's when I really started paying attention to Dad's business records. Not because I was planning anything yet, I just needed something concrete to focus on besides their constant emotional blackmail. So I started looking into the business stuff, just to distract myself from all the twin drama. But man, I had no idea what I was about to uncover. Back in college, I'd help Dad with the books during summer breaks, mostly doing basic data entry and filing stuff. I remembered seeing some weird things, but never really thought much about it. I was just a dumb college kid happy to make some extra money. But now, looking at everything with fresh eyes, things weren't adding up, literally not adding up. I started noticing these patterns in the invoices. They'd have jobs listed for way more materials than what would actually be needed for that type of project. There were also these weird subcontractor companies that kept showing up in the records. I Googled them and found nothing, like absolutely nothing, no websites, no business registrations, nothing. But Dad's company was apparently paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars for work. I still had access to most of the company's digital records from when I helped set up their network. Dad never was good with computers and apparently never bothered to revoke my access. I started downloading everything I could find, bank statements, invoices, payroll records, everything. The more I dug, the worse it got. I found these super sketchy email chains between Dad and some guy named Steve about running it through the usual channels and keeping the paperwork clean. They were talking about cash payments to workers who definitely weren't legal residents. Dad was paying them way below minimum wage and pocketing the difference between that and what he charged clients. But then I found this spreadsheet buried in some random folder. It was basically a second set of books showing the real numbers versus what was being reported to the IRS. Apparently, Dad had been underreporting income by millions of dollars over the years. He had this whole system of fake companies set up to make it look like he was paying for services and materials, but the money was actually just going back into his own accounts. Remember that fancy house they bought? Yeah, turns out they used some of that hidden cash for the down payment. Rachel's name wasn't even on the deed, probably because Dad knew putting her name on it would make it easier to trace the money. I also found emails between Rachel and Dad from before everything came out, talking about how they could use the business to start their new life. She was actually helping him move money around even before she officially started working there. There were these long email chains about setting up new bank accounts and transferring funds around. The whole time I was finding this stuff, they were still trying to force me to be part of their lives. Rachel would send these long texts about how the twins were growing so fast and how I was missing precious moments. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there looking at evidence that she helped Dad steal millions of dollars. The more I dug, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just some small-time tax evasion. This was a whole system of fraud that Dad had been running for years. He had fake employees on the payroll, was laundering money through shell companies, and was probably putting people in danger with all the corner cutting on building materials. What really got me was finding out that he'd started ramping up the fraud right around the time he started seeing Rachel. Like he knew he'd need extra cash to set up his new life with her, so he just started stealing more. There were these huge spikes in material costs that coincided with him buying Rachel jewelry or taking her on weekend trips that Mom didn't know about. I started keeping a detailed log of everything I found, downloaded copies of all the bank statements showing the transfers between accounts, found these sketchy offshore accounts that Dad had set up. He was moving money through them trying to hide it from taxes. All this time, I'd been visiting Mom at the psychiatric hospital, watching her slowly try to put herself back together. And these two were not only living it up on fraud money but planning to steal even more. That's when I realized I couldn't just sit on this information anymore. They needed to face consequences for once in their lives. I spent like a week just sitting on all this evidence, trying to figure out what to do with it. Part of me wanted to just anonymously send it all to the IRS and wash my hands of it, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. These people needed to know exactly who had brought them down and why. The final straw came on this random Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when Rachel showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m. Didn't even text first. She had the twins with her, both crying, and just pushed her way inside as soon as I opened the door. She looked like a mess, hadn't even brushed her hair, and started going on about how their nanny had quit without notice, probably because they weren't paying her properly. Looking back at it now, she needed me to take the twins for the next 3 days because she and Dad had this super important meeting with potential investors. When I said no, she literally sat down on my couch and refused to leave. Started crying about how they were struggling with the business because nobody wants to help family anymore and how the twins needed stability. The whole time she's talking, I'm looking at these two babies who had no idea their whole life was built on lies. I told her she needed to leave. That's when she pulled out her phone and called Dad, putting him on speaker. He started going off about how I was betraying the family and how Mom would be so disappointed in me for not helping my siblings. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I walked over to my desk, pulled out one of the hard drives where I'd saved everything, and just held it up. Told them I knew everything about the business, the fake companies, the money laundering, the bribes, all of it. Rachel's face went completely white. Dad got real quiet on the phone, then Rachel tried to play it off, saying I was just confused about normal business practices. Dad jumped in trying to explain how complicated running a construction company is and how sometimes you have to work around certain regulations to stay competitive. Like, yeah, pretty sure bribing building inspectors isn't a normal business practice, Dad. I laid it all out for them, told them exactly what I'd found, Rachel started panicking, saying I was making stuff up because I was jealous of her new family. Dad switched to threatening mode, saying he'd make sure I never worked in Boston again if I tried anything stupid. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed them the email I'd already drafted to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, complete with attachments and a detailed timeline of the fraud. Told them I also had copies of everything saved in multiple places, so even if they tried to destroy evidence, it was too late. Rachel completely lost it. Started screaming about how I was trying to destroy her children's future, how I was evil for wanting to send their father to jail. The twins were crying, probably scared by all the yelling. She grabbed them and ran out, still screaming about how I was going to regret this. Dad kept calling and texting for hours after that. First trying to reason with me, offering me money to forget what I'd seen. When that didn't work, he switched to threats. Said he'd tell everyone I had helped with the fraud, that I'd gone along with everything for years. But I had proof that I hadn't been involved in the company since those summer jobs in college. I waited until exactly 9 a.m. when the IRS offices opened, sent the email with everything I had. I made sure to detail how I discovered it and my limited involvement years ago, just in case Dad tried to drag me into it. Then I called my Aunt Mary, told her everything. She conference called all my other aunts, except Rachel, obviously. They were shocked about the fraud, but not exactly surprised. Apparently, they'd all wondered how Dad and Rachel were affording their lifestyle. The next few days were intense. The IRS responded pretty quickly, wanting to set up an interview. I got a lawyer just to be safe, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Dad and Rachel both tried to contact me through every possible channel, even sending people from church to my apartment. I blocked their numbers, but they kept making new email accounts to contact me. Rachel even made fake social media profiles to try to message me. They went from begging to threatening to guilt-tripping, sometimes all in the same message. That night I went to visit Mom, didn't tell her what I'd done yet. Her doctor said she wasn't ready for that kind of stress. But for the first time in ages, she actually smiled at me when I walked in, like somehow she knew things were finally going to change. Things moved way faster than I expected after I sent that email to the IRS. Like, I figured it would take months or even years for anything to happen, but nope. Within 2 weeks, IRS criminal investigators were interviewing everyone who'd ever worked for Dad's company. The first sign that things were really going down was when Dad's main office got raided. My friend Mike works at the coffee shop across the street and sent me a video of agents carrying out boxes of files. Dad apparently tried to play it cool, telling everyone it was just a routine audit, but then they started seizing computers and phones, and even Rachel's fancy car got towed away. The investigators found way more stuff than I even knew about. Turns out Dad had been running this whole side operation, where he'd buy up properties through shell companies, use his construction business to renovate them super cheap while charging premium prices on paper, and sell them for huge profits that he never reported. The whole thing started falling apart when one of Dad's foremen decided to cooperate with the investigation. This guy, Tony, had been keeping his own records of all the shady stuff going on, probably as insurance. He had details about the cash payments to undocumented workers, the kickbacks from suppliers, everything. Dad's lawyer must have told him how serious it was getting because he actually tried to flee, like literally tried to run. He booked tickets to Mexico for himself, Rachel, and the twins. The feds picked them up at Logan Airport. Rachel was screaming so loud they had to clear out part of the terminal. The local news got footage of them being led away in handcuffs while some airport employee held the crying twins. That's when all their fancy friends started disappearing. All those people from church who'd been harassing me about family loyalty suddenly couldn't remember ever supporting Dad and Rachel. The country club canceled their membership. Their neighbors started a petition to protect property values by forcing them to sell their house. Rachel's involvement came out during the investigation too. She'd been writing checks to herself from the company accounts, claiming they were for consulting services but actually using the money to buy designer stuff and pay for fancy hotels where she and Dad would meet up during their affair. She'd even used company money to pay for fertility treatments when they were trying to get pregnant with the twins. The prosecutors offered Dad a deal, 5 years if he cooperated and helped them track down all the money. His lawyer probably told him to take it because he signed the agreement pretty quick. Rachel wasn't included in the deal though. Since she tried to destroy evidence after the investigation started, she deleted a bunch of emails and tried to shred documents, not realizing the feds already had copies of everything. Social services got involved because of the twins. They placed them temporarily with Rachel's ex-husband and his new wife, since they already had experience raising her kid Tommy. Rachel completely lost it when she found out. My dad's construction company obviously went under. All the legitimate employees lost their jobs, which I feel bad about. But the investigation found that most of the recent employees were actually just names on paper. Dad was claiming salaries for people who didn't exist and pocketing the money. They seized pretty much everything from them. The house, Rachel's car, their vacation place in Maine, all their bank accounts. The only reason the twins still had clothes and toys was because Tommy's stepmom, Rachel's ex, got married, went to the house before it was seized and packed up their stuff. So while Dad was sitting in federal prison and Rachel was dealing with her own legal mess, the real drama was happening in our extended family and community. This whole situation just split everyone into camps, and people I'd known my whole life started showing their true colors. My cousin Lisa from Mom's side started this private Facebook group for family healing or whatever. It turned into this whole war zone. Rachel somehow got added to it and started posting these long rants about how everyone was abandoning her in her time of need and how her children were suffering without their family support system. The thing is, the twins were actually doing really well with Rachel's ex and his wife Jenny. Jenny's a child psychologist, so she knew how to help them adjust. Tommy was even starting to bond with his half-siblings, which was pretty amazing considering how he felt about the whole situation at first. But Rachel couldn't handle seeing her ex-husband raise her kids again. She started telling everyone that Jenny was trying to replace her as the twins' mother. She even tried to report them to CPS with some made-up stories about neglect. The social workers saw right through it, though, especially since Jenny had documented everything since the twins arrived at their house. The worst part was watching Rachel try to manipulate Tommy through all this. She started sending him these guilt-tripping messages about how he was abandoning his brother and sister by not defending her to the family. Tommy ended up having to start therapy to deal with it all. His dad finally got a court order to make Rachel stop contacting Tommy directly. Then there were all these random people coming out of the woodwork claiming Dad or Rachel owed them money. Like this guy showed up at my apartment saying Dad had promised to invest in his startup. Another woman said Rachel had taken money from her to invest in the construction business. Turns out they'd been running this whole side scam getting investments from people at church. The hardest part isn't even the logistics of it all. It's watching how this has fundamentally changed who we are as people. Mom's doing better in therapy, but there's this heaviness to her now that wasn't there before. The doctors say that's normal. That healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before the trauma. It means learning to live with what happened and building something new from the pieces left behind. I don't know what our family looks like moving forward. The old version of us is gone, shattered beyond repair, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something stronger from the ashes of what they burned down, something that doesn't include people who could hurt their own family this deeply, and still expect us to just get over it. The irony is Dad always taught me about consequences, about owning up to your mistakes and facing what you've done. I guess now he's finally learning that lesson himself, one prison day at a time. As for me, I'm focused on Mom's recovery and letting the legal system do its job. Some people don't deserve a second chance to burn down your life. For now, I'm focusing on being there for Mom and letting the lawyers handle everything else. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I'll keep you guys updated if anything new comes out. Final update. So some stuff has happened since my last post, and I honestly don't even know how to process it all or even write about it. But since a lot of you asked for updates, well, here we go. First off, I should say that Dad's sentence could have been extended because they kept finding more issues with his business dealings. He was supposed to have another hearing next month about some new evidence they found, but that's not happening now. 3 days ago, they found him in his cell. Well, the official statement says it was self-inflicted. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. The guard who found him said there was a letter, but I haven't read it yet. Not sure if I want to. Rachel's completely lost it. She showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m., screaming that I did that to him. She kept yelling about how I destroyed our family and how I'll have to live with this forever. I just stood there letting it all sink in. I honestly don't know how to feel. Should I be sad, angry, relieved? He was still my dad, but also the person who destroyed my mom's life and stole millions of dollars. The person who destroyed the lives of all of us after choosing to have an affair with my aunt and then expected everyone to just be okay with it. The person who tried to make me feel guilty for not wanting to play happy family with their affair babies. Mom's reaction was unexpected. When I told her, she just got really quiet and then said, "I forgive him. Not for my benefit or his," she said, but for herself. Said carrying around anger wasn't helping her heal. Her doctors say this is actually a really positive development for her recovery. The twins are still with Rachel's ex and Jenny. Rachel's facing her own legal troubles, looking at 2 to 3 years minimum, so they'll probably stay there. Tommy's been amazing with them, actually says they shouldn't have to pay for what their parents did. Mom's doctors are monitoring her closely to make sure this doesn't trigger a setback, but she seems stronger than anyone expected. She's even talking about maybe coming home soon, says she wants to reclaim her life. Rachel's still facing charges for her role in the business fraud. Her lawyer tried to use Dad's death to get sympathy from the judge, but the prosecutor has emails proving she was actually the one who came up with some of their schemes. I guess I'm posting this because I need to know, does feeling relieved make me a terrible person?